Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out here tonight to learn a little bit about what's going on in our community. When I came to DuPage County in 2004, I could count the number of possession of heroin cases that we had. They were less than 5. And to give you some idea of where we've come, just a year ago, we had 66 cocaine cases pending and 57 heroin. So it was about 35% of our possession cases were heroin. Just this past January, that 35% jumped to 41%. We had 84 heroin cases pending and only 68 cocaine. I say only 68 because heroin has now surpassed all other drugs as the most prevalent felony possession case that we see in this county. So what are we doing about it as far as prosecution? There's really two avenues. There's addicts and there's drug dealers, and we treat them very differently. Starting with the drug dealers, the laws have changed in Illinois. Just a couple of years ago, the amount required for a non-probationable offense when you're selling heroin was reduced from 5 grams to 3, which gave us a great tool. And then just a year ago, the General Assembly gave us the state version of the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization law, or state RICO law. We used that statute 6 months ago and charged our first RICO case, which involved 31 defendants in a drug trafficking organization. And they were trafficking in heroin throughout Cook and DuPage County. This drug trafficking organization, to give you some idea of how lucrative heroin is, was bringing in between $2,500 and $3,000 a day in heroin sales. And there are, unfortunately, more of these organizations out there. But these kinds of cases involve multiple jurisdictions and a lot of resources and manpower. But that's what we're committed to doing, is going after the drug dealers. When we talk about drug users, it's a far different story. And what we've learned over the years is that treatment is a more effective alternative than incarceration. But treatment only works when people want the treatment. If they're going into our drug court, which is where they get the treatment, if they're going in there just to avoid the penitentiary and they're not committed to it, they're not going to succeed. But for those defendants who do want treatment, we've actually done very well. Since 2002, we've had over 600 defendants enter DuPage County's drug court. Our graduation rate is just over 48%. And we now have 2 tracks. We have a track for those defendants who have serious criminal histories, and we have a track for those who don't. And for those defendants, there's a step increase, a matrix, if you will, of sanctions short of the penitentiary, so that if they mess up, they're not automatically going to the penitentiary. Because when we're talking about heroin, we see a greater incidence of relapse than any other drug. And the drug court is set up to allow for a number of relapses. And those are met with graduated sanctions. Over 60% of our defendants in our drug court are addicted to one or more drugs, but over 60% of those people are addicted to heroin. And that is really an astronomical, incredible number. So when we talk about drug court, we're talking about $3,000 to $5,000 a year for treatment. When we send defendants to the Illinois Department of Corrections, it's about $23,000 a year. When we're talking about drug possession, there's a turnaround in Department of Corrections usually in less than a year's time. And what we found over the years is those defendants go down, they come back out, they're still addicted, and nothing has changed, but we've expended all of these resources. So that is a great alternative for many defendants who are charged with drug possession, and that's what we're doing with those defendants. Many of these cases that are successful, these defendants that come out of drug court are able to get their charges reduced to misdemeanors or, in certain cases, an outright dismissal. We are not about ruining young people's lives with felony convictions if it can be avoided when we're talking about drug addiction. The problem becomes if that addiction is not treated, as Dr. Jorgensen mentioned earlier, these defendants will then steal, they'll break into homes, they'll break into cars to support their habit. And when that happens, then it becomes too late. Then there is no drug court, and it becomes a public safety issue, and we have to deal with those cases accordingly. The good news is that we are making progress not only with our drug court, but we have a mental health court, because as we found, many defendants don't just have a drug addiction, but there's also a mental health component that goes with it, and we try and treat what's ever causing that illness or that addiction. So that's some of what we're doing here in the county. There's one other law I did want to mention, which is the overdose immunity law. It went into effect 2 years ago. That allows for immunity for people who call the paramedics or call the police because somebody is experiencing a drug overdose. Anything 3 grams or less that the police find as a result of responding to that overdose, you have immunity for. It encourages people to call the police and call for help when they're with someone who is experiencing a drug overdose. We were trying to avoid the situation of friends driving someone to the emergency room and literally throwing them out of the car and taking off for fear that they would be arrested and prosecuted. There is progress being made, but this is a public health crisis as well as a law enforcement issue. And what I ask all of you to do tonight when you leave here is please spread the word. Tell your friends, tell other family members, tell people in your community what you learned here tonight and spread the word. And go to the county's website, www.heroindupage.org, where there is a wealth of information about what we're talking about here tonight, where to go, where to seek help. And I'm now going to turn it over to Sergeant Randy Groh from the Sheriff's Office. Thank you.